My parents stole the money I'd saved for years. My father proudly announced that the money was for my brother's future and that I should be glad, so I gave them 3 days to return the money before going to the police. I 29, and last month, I was ready to buy my dream house after saving $390,000 over 10 years. I worked multiple jobs, lived in a tiny apartment, and sacrificed everything for this moment. Then I discovered my parents had emptied my account. When I confronted them, my father smiled coldly and said, "Thanks for your naivety. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future." I couldn't hold back my laughter. If you're wondering why growing up in Boston with Diane and Richard Harper wasn't easy, from my earliest memories, my parents maintained ironclad control over every aspect of my life. My clothing choices, friendship circles, extracurricular activities, even the books I read were subject to their approval. Nothing in our sprawling colonial house was truly mine. Privacy was a foreign concept. "We're only looking out for your best interests," my mother would say, while systematically dismantling any sense of autonomy I tried to build. She was a marketing executive who treated parenting like another project to be managed with clinical precision. My father, a financial advisor with a reputation for aggressive investment strategies, controlled the family finances with similar rigidity. "Money isn't for children to worry about," he'd say, whenever I asked about savings or allowance. Meanwhile, he documented every penny I spent in a little black notebook that lived in his desk drawer. The stark contrast in how they treated my younger brother Tyler made their controlling behavior toward me even more apparent. 4 years my junior, Tyler could seemingly do no wrong. His room was his sanctuary, his choices rarely questioned. My parents funded his hobbies generously, from expensive gaming equipment to travel soccer leagues. When he wrecked his first car at 17, they bought him a newer, better one without a lecture. "Boys will be boys," my mother would shrug while I received a 2-hour lecture for coming home 15 minutes past curfew. Perhaps their favoritism toward Tyler was what pushed me toward financial independence so early. At 16, I got my first job at a local coffee shop, hiding tips in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. By 18, I'd saved enough for my first semester of community college, which I attended while working full-time. My parents were furious when I moved out at 19, taking my meager savings and thrift store furniture to a shared apartment 30 minutes away. "You're making a terrible mistake," my father warned. "You'll be back within 6 months." Instead, I thrived. I transferred to a 4-year college on partial scholarship, majoring in computer science. By 22, I'd landed an entry-level position at a small tech company, and by 25, I'd worked my way up to a senior developer role. My savings strategy was methodical. 30% of every paycheck went into a high-yield savings account. I lived with roommates, drove a 15-year-old car, cooked meals at home, and bought clothes secondhand. Every bonus tax refund and side gig payment went straight into savings. My spreadsheets tracked every dollar, projecting exactly when I'd reach my goal of $400,000 for a house down payment and emergency fund. My relationship with my parents remained strained but civil during those years. I visited on major holidays, called once a week, and deflected their probing questions about my finances. "I'm doing fine" became my standard response. When I met Jessica at a tech conference 3 years ago, my life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. She was brilliant, funny, and understood my drive for independence without me having to explain. After a year of dating, we moved in together further, reducing my living expenses and accelerating my savings timeline. It was Jessica who encouraged me to start house hunting 6 months ago, even though I was $10,000 short of my goal. "Real estate in this area isn't getting cheaper," she pointed out logically, "and interest rates are still reasonable. It makes sense to start looking now." We spent weekends touring open houses, gradually refining our wish list. 3 bedrooms, a home office, a decent kitchen, a small yard, and most importantly, a location that wouldn't require a soul-crushing commute to either of our jobs. When we found the perfect house in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, I knew immediately. The 3-bedroom Craftsman with original woodwork and an updated kitchen was listed at $385,000, almost exactly matching my savings. "We could put an office in the smallest bedroom," Jessica said, as we wandered through the sunlit rooms during our second viewing. "And the backyard has enough space for that garden you've always wanted." For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to picture a future that felt completely my own, a home that no one could control or take away from me, a foundation for the life I'd been working toward for a decade. My parents predictably were less enthusiastic. "Home ownership is a trap at your age," my father insisted during a Sunday phone call. "You'll be tied down with maintenance and property taxes when you should be focusing on career advancement." "And why rush into such a commitment?" my mother added. "You're still so young. Plenty of time to settle down later." Their reaction was expected, so I didn't share further details about the house or my plans to make an offer, which is why I was confused when during our next family dinner, my father mentioned the beautiful oak cabinets in the kitchen of the house I was considering. I hadn't told them about the oak cabinets. "How did you know about that?" I asked Fork, pausing midway to my mouth. My father looked momentarily flustered before recovering. "You must have mentioned it during our last call." I knew I hadn't, but I let it slide, attributing it to coincidence, or perhaps Jessica mentioning it during a separate conversation with them. Looking back, that moment should have been my first warning that something wasn't right. The first concrete sign that something was wrong came 3 days after that dinner when my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't recognize: account access confirmed from new device. I frowned at the alert from my banking app, which I hadn't opened that day. I immediately logged in through my secure browser and checked my recent activity. Everything looked normal. No unauthorized transactions. Still, the notification bothered me enough that I called the bank's customer service line. We show a login from a new IP address at 2:15 p.m. today. The representative confirmed after verifying my identity. It appears to be from within your state. Would you like us to lock your account and issue new credentials? Since nothing seemed amiss with my balance or transaction history, I opted for a password change instead, assuming I'd perhaps logged in from work and forgotten. Still, a nagging sense of unease lingered. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, I received an email notification about a successful login from an unrecognized device. I immediately called the bank again, this time speaking with a security specialist named Marcus. "Ms. Harper, I'm showing multiple access points to your account over the past week," he explained after reviewing my records. "Some appear to be from mobile devices not registered to your profile." "Is anything missing?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. "Has anyone transferred money out?" "I don't see any unauthorized transfers yet, but there have been several inquiries about wire transfer procedures," Marcus replied. "Would you like me to place a temporary freeze on your account while we investigate further?" I agreed, immediately setting up additional security protocols, including a requirement for verbal confirmation of any transfers over $1,000. Marcus assured me they would monitor my account closely and suggested I run a security scan on all my devices. That evening, I did exactly that, starting with my phone and then moving to my laptop. Nothing appeared unusual until I ran a deep system scan on my personal computer, the one I'd had for about 3 years, and primarily used for managing my finances and personal projects. The scan revealed an unfamiliar program running quietly in the background, something that didn't appear in my regular programs list. After some research and a call to a tech-savvy friend, I discovered it was a sophisticated tracking software that could record keystrokes, capture screenshots, and essentially monitor everything I did on my computer. My blood ran cold as I tried to determine when and how this software had been installed. Then I remembered that about 4 months earlier, my laptop had been running slowly, and during a visit to my parents' house, my father had offered to clean it up for me. "I'll run some diagnostics and optimization programs," he'd said, taking my computer into his home office for several hours. "You know, this is what I do for clients all the time." He'd returned it later that evening, noticeably faster and good as new. I thanked him, never suspecting he'd used the opportunity to install spyware. With growing dread, I realized this meant my parents had potentially been monitoring my financial activities for months. They would have seen my online banking sessions, my house hunting searches, every email about mortgage pre-approval, and even conversations with Jessica about our future plans. My hands shaking, I logged into my main savings account using Jessica's tablet, bypassing the temporary freeze with a phone verification. The balance read 0. Where there should have been $390,000, the result of 10 years of disciplined saving and sacrifice, there was nothing. I frantically checked my transaction history to find a wire transfer completed the previous day, sending the entire balance to an account I didn't recognize. The room spun around me as Jessica rushed over, alarmed by the sound that came out of my throat, something between a gasp and a scream. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked, gripping my shoulders as I stared blankly at the screen. "It's gone," I whispered. "Everything. 10 years of savings, the house, our future. It's all gone." Jessica took the tablet, quickly scanning the information. "This has to be fraud," she said firmly. "We'll call the bank right now and report it. They can reverse wire transfers if we act quickly." But as I regained my composure and looked more closely at the transfer details, a sickening realization dawned. The receiving account holder information included a name I recognized all too well: Richard Harper, my father. "It's not fraud," I said quietly. "It's my parents." I tried calling them immediately, but neither answered. Text messages went unread. I even emailed both their personal and work addresses with the subject line "Emergency, please contact me," but received no response. By morning, after a sleepless night pacing our apartment, I'd left 6 voicemails and sent countless messages. The silence was deafening, and in that silence my shock transformed into something harder, more resolute. "I'm going over there," I told Jessica as I grabbed my car keys today. "I'm coming with you," she replied, already reaching for her jacket. I shook my head. "I need to do this alone, but I'll call you immediately if I need backup." As I drove the 40 minutes to my parents' suburban home, my mind raced through possible explanations, each more implausible than the last. Perhaps it was a terrible mistake. Maybe they were trying to protect the money somehow. Could they have transferred it to a better investment vehicle as a misguided surprise? But the tracking software on my computer told a different story. This was calculated deliberate, a violation so profound I could barely process it. The familiar tree-lined street where I grew up looked exactly the same as always. Neatly trimmed hedges, freshly mulched flower beds, the American flag flying from the front porch, everything in its proper place just as my parents preferred. I parked in the driveway behind my father's luxury sedan and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I walked up the brick pathway and rang the doorbell, though I still had a key somewhere in my apartment. My mother answered, her expression shifting from surprise to something carefully neutral when she saw me. Emily, she said, stepping back to let me in. This is unexpected. We usually do Sunday dinners, not Tuesday drop-ins. Is Dad home? I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. In his study? Is everything all right? I didn't answer, just walked past her toward my father's home office. He looked up from his computer as I entered, removing his reading glasses. Emily, he said, smiling blandly. What brings you by on a weekday? I closed the door behind me, suddenly aware of how calm I felt. Beyond anger, beyond shock, something crystalline and clear had formed in my chest. I know what you did, I said simply. My father's expression didn't change. You'll need to be more specific. $390,000 transferred yesterday from my savings account to yours and the tracking software you installed on my laptop when you supposedly fixed it. A flicker of something, not quite guilt, but perhaps surprise that I discovered everything so quickly. Then his face settled into firm resolve. Sit down, Emily, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I'd sat for countless lectures throughout my childhood. I remained standing. Where is my money? I asked. My mother entered, then closing the door softly behind her. Richard, she said quietly. She knows. Of course she knows, he replied, sooner than we expected. But that doesn't change anything. He turned back to me. The money is safe, he said, as if that answered everything. We made a family decision about its best use. A family decision, I repeated incredulously. You made a decision about my money that I've saved for 10 years without even talking to me. That's not a family decision. That's theft. Don't be dramatic, my mother cut in, her voice sharp. We're your parents. We've always known what's best for you, even when you can't see it yourself. I'm 29 years old. I have a successful career, a relationship, and until yesterday, I had a plan to buy a house. You had no right to interfere. My father stood his height, still imposing even though I was an adult now. We had every right. You were about to make a terrible financial mistake, tying up all your liquid assets in an overpriced property in a market that's about to turn. We protected you from yourself by stealing from me. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. By reallocating family resources where they'll do the most good, he corrected. Your brother has been accepted to an elite business school, and he has a startup idea that needs capital. His education and business will benefit this family for generations. As if on cue, the front door opened and closed, and moments later my brother Tyler appeared in the doorway of the study, looking confused at finding us all there. What's going on? He asked, glancing between us. Nothing that concerns you, my mother said quickly. Actually, I said, turning to face him. They just stole my entire savings account to give to you. $390,000 that I've been saving for 10 years to buy a house. Apparently your education and business idea are more important than my future. Tyler's eyes widened. What? That can't be right. He looked at our parents. Tell me that's not true. My father's expression hardened. Emily is being selfish as usual. We made a decision that benefits the family as a whole. By stealing her money? Tyler asked incredulously. It's not stealing when it's for your child's own good, my mother insisted. Emily was about to waste all that money on a house she doesn't need at her age. Your future is more promising. Tyler looked horrified. I never asked for that. I would never want her money taken from me. My father waved his hand dismissively. You'll understand when you're older, both of you. Sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions. He turned to me, his expression smug. Thanks for your naivety. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future. And then to everyone's surprise, including my own, I started laughing. Not a small chuckle, but full-bodied laughter that bent me at the waist. My parents exchanged concerned glances. Emily, my mother said cautiously, are you all right? I straightened, wiping tears from my eyes. I'm better than all right. I'm fantastic, because you didn't get what you think you got. My father's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? $390,000 is what I had in total savings, I explained, still smiling. But last week, after getting pre-approved for a mortgage, I moved $351,000 to a separate secure account at a different bank, one that you didn't know about. The account you emptied only had $39,000 in it. The color drained from my father's face. That's not possible. We monitored your main account. You never made any large transfers. No, I didn't. I agreed because after I noticed some strange activities on my account, I went to the bank in person and arranged for a banker to help me transfer the funds physically with no digital trail. I was planning to surprise Jessica with the good news that we could make an offer on the house with extra funds for renovations. My mother sank into a chair. You're lying. Call the bank if you don't believe me, I replied. Though I'm not sure you want to draw more attention to what you've done. Tyler moved to stand beside me. I want no part of this, he said firmly. Whatever they took from you, I don't want it, and I'll help you get it back. My father's shock quickly transformed into anger. You ungrateful children. After everything we've done for you. What you've done, I said, my voice steady, is commit fraud and theft. You installed spyware on my computer without my knowledge or consent. You used that information to access my bank account without authorization. And you transferred funds that didn't belong to you. That's not parenting. That's criminal. You wouldn't press charges against your own parents, my mother said, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Watch me, I replied. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. You have 24 hours to return my $39,000. After that, I'm going to the police with evidence of everything you've done. As Tyler and I walked out together, leaving our parents stunned in the study, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying my entire life. My 24-hour deadline came and went with no money returned and no communication from my parents. True to my word, I filed a police report the following morning, bringing copies of bank statements, screenshots of the unauthorized wire transfer, and evidence of the spyware found on my computer. Detective Kimberly Walsh took my statement, her expression growing increasingly serious as I explained the situation. Unfortunately, we see cases like this more often than you might think, she told me. Family financial exploitation is surprisingly common, though your parents' methods were unusually sophisticated. She explained that they would investigate, but also recommended I consult with an attorney who specialized in financial crimes. Criminal charges are one avenue, she said, but civil action may be your best bet for recovering the funds quickly. Through a colleague's recommendation, I found Sarah Williams, an attorney who had previously handled several cases involving parental financial abuse of adult children. Her office was small, but impeccably professional, and she listened intently as I recounted my story. First things first, she said when I'd finished, we'll file for an emergency injunction to freeze the funds they took so they can't spend or hide them. Then we'll proceed with both civil claims for the return of your money plus damages and work with the police on potential criminal charges. True to her word, Sarah moved quickly. By the end of the week, a judge had granted our request to freeze my parents' accounts where my money had been deposited. The formal complaint filed against them included charges of theft, fraud, unauthorized computer access, and invasion of privacy. My parents' response was swift and predictable. They hired Bradford Montgomery, one of the most expensive attorneys in the city, known for representing wealthy clients in complex financial disputes. Their formal response to our complaint was a blend of denial and justification, claiming they had acted out of parental concern and fiduciary duty. More shocking was their countersuit, alleging that I had borrowed money from them throughout my early adulthood, with a verbal agreement to repay it, and that the $39,000 they took was simply collection of this family debt. This is completely fabricated, I told Sarah when she showed me their filing. I've never borrowed money from them as an adult. In fact, I've been financially independent since I was 19. I believe you, she assured me, but we'll need to gather evidence to refute their claims. Bank records showing your income and expenses over the years, testimonials from friends or colleagues who can attest to your financial independence, anything that contradicts their narrative. The case quickly drew attention beyond our family. The local news ran a story about modern digital privacy concerns without naming us directly but clearly referencing our situation. My inbox filled with messages from friends, colleagues, and even a few distant relatives, all expressing varying degrees of shock support or in some cases criticism for taking legal action against my own parents. The most painful messages came from my mother's sister, Aunt Lauren, who had always been kind to me growing up. Family matters should stay within the family, she wrote. Your parents may have made a mistake, but dragging them through the courts will only destroy any chance of reconciliation. Is that really what you want? What I wanted, I realized, was something my aunt couldn't understand. Accountability. For once in my life, I wanted my parents to face consequences for their controlling behavior rather than being allowed to rewrite reality to suit their preferences. Jessica proved to be my steadfast support through all of this. She took days off work to accompany me to meetings with Sarah, organized our growing file of evidence, and held me on the nights when the stress and hurt finally caught up with me. You're doing the right thing, she would whisper as I cried against her shoulder. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you a bad daughter. They broke your trust in the most fundamental way. Tyler, too, surprised me with his unwavering support. Despite pressure from our parents and extended family, he provided a written statement confirming he had never asked for or wanted my money, and detailing the pattern of favoritism and control he had witnessed growing up. I've always felt guilty about how differently they treated us, he confessed during a lunch meeting with me and Sarah, but I never thought they'd go this far. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. The most difficult part of the legal process was the deposition, where I had to sit across from my parents and their attorney while answering questions for hours. They looked smaller somehow. My mother's perfectly maintained appearance showing cracks of stress. My father's confident posture diminished. Bradford Montgomery, their attorney, tried repeatedly to paint me as ungrateful, financially irresponsible, and vindictive. Isn't it true, he asked, peering over his glasses? Your parents repeatedly advised you against purchasing property at your age, showing financial wisdom you chose to ignore. They expressed their opinion. I replied carefully as Sarah had coached me, but opinions don't entitle them to access my bank account without permission or install spyware on my computer. And isn't it true that your brother's education and business prospects represent a better long-term investment for family resources than an overpriced house in a volatile market? Sarah objected before I could answer. Family resources implies joint ownership. The funds in question were the sole property of my client, earned through her employment, and systematically saved over a decade. As the weeks stretched into months, the emotional and financial toll of the legal battle grew. The house Jessica and I had fallen in love with sold to another buyer. My parents began a whisper campaign among family friends, suggesting I had mental health issues that had led to false accusations against them. Thanks for your naivety. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future. As if my decade of hard work and sacrifice meant nothing. As if I existed only to further his preferred child's opportunities. So we pressed on. Sarah gathered digital forensics experts who testified about the sophisticated nature of the spyware installed on my computer and traced its installation directly to the time period when my father had possession of my laptop. Bank records clearly showed my consistent pattern of saving over 10 years, contradicting my parents' claims of debt repayment. The case was scheduled for court with a hearing date set for exactly 3 months after my initial discovery of the theft. Despite my parents' attempts to delay, the judge denied their motions, citing the straightforward nature of the evidence. As we prepared for our day in court, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. Bradford Montgomery wanted to discuss settlement terms. My parents, it seemed, had finally realized they might not win this battle. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that seemed too harsh for the weight of what was about to unfold. I sat beside Sarah at the plaintiff's table, my back straight despite the knot of tension between my shoulder blades. Across the aisle, my parents sat with Bradford Montgomery, neither looking in my direction. Judge Patricia Alvarez entered, and the proceedings began with opening statements. Sarah went first, her voice clear and confident as she laid out the main facts of the case without emotional embellishment. This case is fundamentally about violation, she concluded. Violation of privacy through unauthorized surveillance software, violation of financial autonomy through unauthorized account access, and most painfully, violation of the sacred trust between parent and child. Bradford Montgomery's opening painted a different picture, portraying my parents as concerned mentors who had tried to guide their impulsive daughter away from financial ruin. The Harpers have decades of financial expertise between them, he argued smoothly. They witnessed their daughter about to commit her entire savings to an overpriced property in a precarious market. Their actions, while perhaps overzealous, were motivated by parental protection, not criminal intent. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt both numb and shaky. After being sworn in, I looked out at the courtroom, briefly meeting Jessica's encouraging gaze from the gallery. Miss Harper, Sarah began gently. Please tell the court about your financial history since becoming an adult. I described my path to independence, the multiple jobs, the careful budgeting, the systematic saving, all documented in the financial records already submitted as evidence. I explained my dream of home ownership and the security it represented to me. And when did you first suspect something was wrong with your account, Sarah prompted. I detailed the strange notifications, the discovery of the spyware, and the devastating moment when I realized my entire savings had vanished, transferred to an account in my father's name. Did you ever give your parents permission to access your financial accounts? No, never. Did you ever agree that your savings should go toward your brother's education or business ventures? Absolutely not. And how has this incident affected you, Miss Harper? I paused, gathering my thoughts. Beyond the obvious financial impact, it shattered my sense of security. The two people who were supposed to protect me instead exploited my trust in the most intimate way possible, monitoring my private communications and taking what I'd worked so hard to build. There are moments I still can't believe it's real. Bradford Montgomery's cross-examination was aggressive as expected. He questioned my financial knowledge compared to my father's expertise. He implied that my decision to buy a house was emotionally driven rather than financially sound. He even suggested that my parents had discussed their concerns with me multiple times and I had stubbornly refused to listen. No, I corrected firmly. They expressed opinions about my house hunting. Yes, but at no point did they say, we're considering taking your money for your brother instead. That's not a conversation we ever had. The digital forensics expert who examined my computer was next methodically explaining how the spyware worked when it was installed and the extent of surveillance it enabled. This software captures keystrokes, including passwords, she explained to the visibly disturbed judge. It takes periodic screenshots without the user's knowledge and uploads them to a remote server. It can even activate the computer's camera and microphone remotely. This is not consumer-grade parental monitoring software, but rather sophisticated surveillance technology typically used in corporate espionage or by private investigators. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat as she detailed the exact date and time the software was installed, matching precisely to when he had taken my laptop to fix it. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. The bank manager who had helped me transfer the majority of my savings to a secure account took the stand, confirming that I had come to the bank in person, expressed concerns about unusual account activity, and asked for assistance in protecting my assets. Ms. Harper specifically mentioned feeling that someone might be monitoring her online banking activity, he recalled. She requested that we handle the transfer with no digital notification or electronic trail, which is unusual but not unprecedented when clients have security concerns. This testimony directly contradicted my parents' claim that I had fabricated the story about transferring most of my money before they accessed my account. The real surprise of the day came during my brother Tyler's testimony. I had expected him to confirm his written statement about never asking for my money, but he went much further. My parents have always treated Emily and me differently, he stated clearly. Growing up, I received opportunities, trust, and resources that she didn't, for no reason except that I was their son and she was their daughter. A murmur ran through the courtroom as he continued. When I learned what they had done with Emily's money supposedly for my benefit, I was horrified, but I wasn't entirely surprised. This fits a pattern of control they've maintained over her for as long as I can remember. Then, voice steady, he revealed something I hadn't known. After Emily discovered what happened, our parents approached me with $50,000 to start my business, immediately saying it was my portion of a family investment. When I refused it and said I would support Emily in court if necessary, they threatened to withdraw funding for my education entirely. My mother made a small sound from her seat, and my father's face flushed dark red. "Tyler, that's enough," he said sharply, earning a quick reprimand from the judge about speaking out of turn. As the first day of proceedings ended, Sarah looked cautiously optimistic. "The judge seems troubled by the evidence," she whispered, "as we gathered our things, particularly the sophisticated nature of the spyware and your brother's testimony." The second day brought an unexpected development. Before proceedings began, Bradford Montgomery requested a brief recess to speak with his clients. When court resumed 30 minutes later, he approached the bench. "Your Honor, my clients would like to propose a settlement." The terms were straightforward. Full return of the $39,000 plus $20,000 in damages to cover my legal fees and emotional distress. In exchange, I would drop all claims and agree not to pursue criminal charges. Judge Alvarez turned to me. "Ms. Harper, are these terms acceptable to you?" I looked at my parents, really looked at them perhaps for the first time in my adult life. My mother's perfect posture, my father's confident facade, both now showing cracks under pressure. They had monitored my most private communications, violated my trust, taken what wasn't theirs, all while believing they were entitled to control my life even as an adult. "No, Your Honor," I said clearly. "Those terms are not acceptable." Montgomery looked stunned. Sarah leaned close to me, whispering urgently, "Emily, this is a reasonable offer. We should consider it." "I've spent my entire life being reasonable while they've been controlling," I replied quietly. "I want the court to decide." And so the proceedings continued. Financial records from my parents' accounts revealed something I hadn't known. They had been experiencing significant financial pressure themselves. My father's investment firm had lost several major clients in the past year. Their mortgage was underwater after a poorly timed refinance. Tyler's elite business school tuition was beyond what they could comfortably afford. They had taken my money not just out of a desire to control me or favor my brother, but out of desperation to maintain appearances and expectations that they could no longer financially support. This revelation didn't excuse their actions, but it provided context that helped me understand the frantic violation of boundaries. They were drowning, and saw my savings as a life raft, justifying the theft through a lifetime of paternalistic control. In her closing argument, Sarah emphasized the deliberate nature of my parents' actions. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. She stated firmly, it was a calculated series of invasions executed over months, culminating in the theft of my client's life savings. The court must send a clear message that family ties do not exempt anyone from basic legal and ethical boundaries. Bradford Montgomery's closing was more subdued than his opening had been, focusing primarily on my parents' previously unblemished reputation in the community and their sincere belief that they were acting in the family's best interest. Judge Alvarez took a day to consider her ruling. When we returned to court, the tension was palpable. In the case of Harper versus Harper, she began, her voice stern. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant's actions constitute a clear violation of multiple statutes regarding privacy, unauthorized computer access, and financial fraud." She ordered my parents to return the full $39,000 plus $50,000 in punitive damages and granted a permanent injunction barring them from any contact with my financial institutions or electronic devices. While the court acknowledges the special relationship between parents and children, she added, looking directly at my parents, that relationship does not confer ownership or control of an adult child's assets. Ms. Harper has demonstrated admirable financial responsibility and independence. The paternalistic overreach demonstrated by the defendants is particularly troubling, given the sophisticated methods employed. As a final point, she noted that she would be referring the case to the district attorney's office for consideration of criminal charges, though the decision to prosecute would be at their discretion. My parents sat motionless as the ruling was read, my father's face pale, my mother's eyes downcast. They had lost not just the case, but the carefully constructed narrative they'd built around their actions, their parenting, and their own financial stability. As we left the courtroom, Tyler caught up with me in the hallway. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes. I considered the question seriously. "Not yet," I answered honestly, "but I will be." The weeks following the court ruling brought both practical challenges and emotional upheaval. My parents complied with the financial judgment, promptly, likely hoping to minimize their exposure to potential criminal charges. The district attorney ultimately decided not to pursue criminal prosecution, citing my parents' clean prior record and the full financial restitution already made. With the return of my $39,000, plus the additional $50,000 in damages, I now had even more than my original savings goal. Jessica and I resumed house hunting, though the market had shifted slightly in the months of legal proceedings. What about this one? Jessica asked one Saturday morning in bed, her tablet propped against her knees as she scrolled through listings. 4 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, about 10 minutes farther from downtown than we were looking before. The house was beautiful, slightly larger than our original target with a wraparound porch and established garden. The price was within our budget, especially now. It's perfect, I said, a flutter of excitement replacing the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for months. Let's see it today. 2 weeks later, our offer was accepted. As we signed the mountain of paperwork at closing, I felt a surreal sense of accomplishment. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and legal battle and public exposure, I had achieved what I'd worked toward for 10 years. Congratulations, homeowners, the real estate agent said, handing us the keys with a flourish. That night, Jessica and I sat on the bare floor of our new living room, sharing takeout and champagne by the light of a single floor lamp we brought from our apartment. To new beginnings, Jessica toasted her glass, clinking against mine, and to hard lessons learned, I added quietly. The emotional fallout from the case was more complicated than the practical aspects. I established firm boundaries with my parents, including no unannounced visits to our new home and no discussions of my finances ever. Our interactions were limited to brief civil exchanges at family gatherings, which I attended primarily to maintain my relationship with Tyler. My brother had moved out of our parents' home shortly after the court case concluded, renting a small apartment near his university. He was pursuing his business degree but with student loans and part-time work rather than parental funding. It's harder this way, he admitted, when he came over to help us paint the new living room. But it feels more honest somehow, like I'm building something that's truly mine. I understood completely. My parents made several attempts at reconciliation, each revealing how little they'd actually changed. My mother sent an elaborate housewarming gift with a card that read, "We hope you'll now see that everything worked out for the best in the end." My father called on my birthday with an investment opportunity he thought would be perfect for that settlement money, apparently having learned nothing about respecting my financial autonomy. Each time I politely but firmly reinforced my boundaries, refusing to be drawn into their preferred narrative that the entire episode had been an unfortunate misunderstanding, now happily resolved. They still don't get it, I told my therapist, Dr. Andrea Reeves, during one of our weekly sessions. I had started therapy shortly after the court case, recognizing that legal resolution hadn't automatically healed the emotional wounds. They see the outcome, the house, the money, but they don't understand what they destroyed. Trust once broken is incredibly difficult to rebuild. Dr. Reeves agreed, especially when the breaching party doesn't fully acknowledge the violation. Your parents may never truly understand the impact of their actions. Your healing can't depend on their recognition. That was perhaps the hardest lesson, accepting that my parents might never genuinely understand or apologize for what they'd done. My choice was to either continue hoping for a validation that might never come, or to build my life and healing independent of their acknowledgement. I chose the latter path. Jessica and I created our home together, filling it with furniture. We loved painting the walls, colors that made us happy, and gradually transforming it into a sanctuary that felt entirely our own. We established traditions and rhythms that had nothing to do with my family of origin. The professional consequences of the case surprised me. While I'd worried about potential embarrassment or career damage from the public court proceedings, the opposite occurred. My story resonated with many people, particularly young professionals, navigating complex family financial dynamics. At a tech conference 6 months after the case concluded, I was approached by a senior developer from a major cybersecurity firm. "Your experience was unfortunately common," she told me over coffee. "The technical aspects of your case, combined with your background in development, make you uniquely qualified to understand both the emotional and technical dimensions of privacy violations. We have an opening on our family security team if you're interested." The position offered a significant salary increase and the opportunity to develop tools specifically designed to protect individuals from the kind of surveillance I had experienced. After careful consideration, I accepted, finding unexpected purpose in transforming my painful experience into protection for others. Jessica's career was thriving too. Her design consultancy had landed several major clients, and she was considering bringing on a partner to manage the growing workload. Our professional success, combined with our new home, created a foundation of security that helped heal some of the trust wounds inflicted by my parents. One crisp fall evening, as we sat on our new porch swing watching the neighborhood children play across the street, Jessica reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been waiting for the right moment," she said, her voice uncharacteristically nervous. "And I realized there might not be a perfect time, but this feels close." Inside the box was a simple, elegant ring. "I know we've talked about marriage in the abstract," she continued, "but after everything we've been through this year, I'm more certain than ever that you're who I want to build a life with. Will you marry me?" The joy that flooded through me in that moment was untainted by the shadows of the past year. "Yes," I said simply, letting her slide the ring onto my finger before pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like promises and possibility. Tyler was the first person I called with the news, and his genuine happiness for us was another small healing. He had become not just my brother, but my friend. Our relationship recreated on healthier terms now that we were both free from our parents' manipulative dynamics. Our first holiday season in the new house approached with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The question of whether to include my parents in our celebrations loomed large. "What do you want to do?" Jessica asked as we discussed Thanksgiving plans. "It's completely your call." After much consideration, I decided to host a small gathering that included Tyler and a few close friends, but not my parents. Instead, I sent them a brief but civil card wishing them well for the holiday. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet, but it was a conscious choice not to let their actions continue to dictate my life choices or emotional well-being. I was building something new, something that honored the strength I discovered in standing up for myself while leaving space for joy, connection, and even eventual healing. As Jessica and I prepared our first Thanksgiving dinner in our new home surrounded by chosen family, I realized that despite everything, perhaps because of everything, I had found my way to exactly where I was meant to be. 1 year after the court ruling, my life had transformed in ways both visible and invisible. Our house had become a true home with a vegetable garden in the backyard and walls filled with artwork and photographs. Jessica and I had married in a small ceremony on our property with Tyler as my person of honor and a handful of close friends as witnesses. My relationship with my parents remained limited but civil. We had established what my therapist called structured contact with clear boundaries and expectations. Holiday gatherings were hosted at neutral locations, conversations kept to safe topics, and any attempts to discuss finances or offer unwanted advice were met with a polite but firm redirection. "I'm still working on forgiveness," I told Dr. Reeves during our now monthly sessions. "Not for their benefit, but for mine. Carrying anger takes energy. I'd rather direct elsewhere. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the same patterns to continue," she reminded me. "It can simply mean accepting what happened and choosing to move forward without letting it control your present." That perspective helped me navigate the complex emotions that still occasionally surfaced. There were moments when a casual comment or familiar gesture from my mother would trigger a flash of the old hurt and betrayal. But those moments became less frequent, less intense as I continued to build a life defined by my choices rather than their actions. Tyler had graduated and launched a modest but promising tech startup funded through a combination of small investors and a grant program for young entrepreneurs. He had made a point of establishing his business completely independent of our parents' financial input, despite their repeated offers of help. "I'm following your example," he told me over dinner at our house one evening, "building something that's truly mine." His progress in therapy was evident in the way he now established his own boundaries and pursued his own path without seeming torn by guilt or obligation. We had both learned that family connections, while important, weren't worth sacrificing our autonomy or self-respect. The most unexpected development of the year had been my growing involvement in financial education and digital security awareness. What had begun as a single guest lecture at a local community college sharing my experience with identity protection students had evolved into a regular speaking engagement and eventually a workshop series I developed called Digital Boundaries. The workshops combined practical skills for securing personal information with deeper discussions about setting and maintaining boundaries, particularly in family financial dynamics. I partnered with local domestic violence organizations, recognizing that financial control was often an overlooked aspect of abusive relationships. "Your story resonates because it's about more than just money or technology," my co-facilitator Marissa explained after a particularly impactful session. "It's about the fundamental right to independence to build your own life on your own terms." Jessica's design business had grown enough that she had taken on 2 employees and moved to a small office space downtown. Her work brought beauty and function to spaces throughout our city, while my career in cybersecurity allowed me to create protection and peace of mind for vulnerable users. Together, we had created not just a home, but a foundation for meaningful work that extended beyond our own experience, transforming pain into purpose in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days after discovering my parents' betrayal. My perspective on family had evolved significantly. I'd come to appreciate that biology offered no guarantees of healthy connection or mutual respect. The most meaningful relationships in my life were now built on choice, trust, and reciprocity rather than obligation or shared DNA. "Family is who sees you clearly and loves you anyway," Jessica said one evening as we hosted a dinner gathering that included Tyler, my closest work colleagues, and friends who had supported us through the legal battle and beyond. Looking around the table at these people who had chosen to show up for me, who had earned my trust and honored my boundaries, I knew she was right. This understanding didn't diminish the complexity of my feelings about my parents. I could acknowledge their formative role in my life, even some positive aspects of my upbringing, while still maintaining the boundaries necessary for my well-being. I could wish them well without allowing them the opportunity to harm me again. On the anniversary of the court ruling, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike his previous attempts at communication, which had been defensive or minimizing this message, seemed different from the first line. "I've been doing some difficult reflection," he wrote. "While I still believe our intentions were to protect the family, I've come to recognize that our methods were deeply wrong. The privacy violation and taking your money without permission were inexcusable breaches of trust, regardless of our motivations. I don't expect this acknowledgement to change anything between us, but after a year of therapy of my own, I felt it important to take responsibility for my actions without qualification." I read the message several times, sharing it with Jessica, and discussing it in my next therapy session. It wasn't a magical resolution, not a Hollywood moment of tearful reconciliation, but it was perhaps the first genuine accountability my father had offered in my entire life. I responded briefly, thanking him for the acknowledgement, without promising any change in our current arrangement. True repair, if it was ever possible, would require sustained change over time, not a single moment of insight. As I reflect on the journey from that devastating discovery to my life today, I'm struck by how a violation meant to control and diminish me instead catalyzed growth and independence beyond what I had previously imagined possible. The very qualities my parents tried to suppress, my determination and self-reliance, ultimately protected me from the worst of their actions. The most valuable lesson I've learned is that true security comes not from controlling others or being controlled, but from building a life aligned with your own values, surrounded by relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Freedom isn't just financial, though that's certainly part of it. It's the ability to define your own path and set your own boundaries, especially when those closest to you resist. If my story resonates with you in any way, I hope it offers some validation or courage for your own journey. The path to establishing healthy boundaries isn't always straight or easy, particularly with family, but it's worth every difficult step.